To the 42 greedy relatives gathered in the grand hall, it was a simple will reading, their final step to claiming a fortune. They sipped champagne and mocked the quiet woman in the corner, a sad figure in a gray dress they mistook for a servant. What they didn't know was that they weren't guests. They were subjects in a meticulously designed test. Every condescending whisper was being recorded. Every sneer was being judged. And the woman they were publicly shaming? She was the one who had helped set the trap. Part 1. The humiliation. She was dismissed the moment the heavy oak door groaned open. The sound it made was not a welcome but a weary complaint, as if the house itself begrudged her presence. The air inside was thick, a suffocating mixture of old money, expensive perfume, and the scent of roses slowly wilting in crystal vases. That cost more than most people's rent. A silence fell over the grand hall, not the silence of reverence, but that of a predator when unfamiliar prey wanders into its territory. 42 pairs of eyes, sharp as shards from a champagne flute, turned on her in unison. Ivy Clark stood on the threshold, an incongruous figure in a simple gray linen dress, a faded cardigan hanging loosely from one shoulder, and quiet flats that made no sound. She was a single muted note in a symphony of silk, diamonds, and perfectly tailored suits. Smiles bloomed on their lips, but they didn't reach their eyes. They were too sharp, too polished to be sincere. Preston Thorne, Logan's second cousin with a gold tie cinched around his neck like a proclamation, was the first to break the silence. He leaned against a mahogany table, the Rolex on his wrist, catching the light from the crystal chandelier that hung from the ceiling like a frozen waterfall. He didn't look at Ivy directly, but at a woman in a red dress beside him, his voice deliberately raised for the entire room to hear, half laughing, half mocking. Seriously? Who let the serving staff in through the main entrance? A ripple of small, venomous chuckles went through the room. The woman in red, Marissa, Preston's sister, tilted her head. Her golden hair was swept into an elegant chignon, revealing winking diamond earrings. "She must be the new maid," she whispered, but with enough volume to carry across the room. Or perhaps one of Logan's sad little ex-mistresses, looking for a final payout. Ivy didn't answer, didn't flinch. She simply stepped inside, choosing a quiet corner near a tall window that framed the misty hills outside. Her feet glided over the cold marble floor, her silence seeming only to agitate the others more. She gently adjusted the strap of the cloth. Bag in her hand, a simple thing stitched with care, not a logo in sight. To them, she was a ghost, an outsider who had wandered into a world meant for blood, legacy, and status. They didn't know that the woman they were humiliating was the mistress of all of this. And today's will reading was a test she herself had helped design. Across the room, Clara, the social media famous niece with a tech startup and millions of followers, nudged her friend, Elise. "I bet she's one of his charity cases," Clara whispered, her sharp eyes fixed on Ivy. "Look at her bag. She's probably carrying her lunch in it." Elise snickered, quickly pulling out her gold-trimmed phone. The screen flashed as she surreptitiously took a photo of Ivy, who now stood quietly looking out the window. "This is so going on my story," Elise said, her voice giddy. Clara's fingers flew across her own screen. She posted the photo Elise had just sent, adding a cruel caption that she typed out in the open. "Found Logan's charity case, crashing the will reading. Guess she thinks thrift store chic gets her $1 billion. She made sure to say the last part aloud, ensuring Ivy could hear every word. A louder wave of laughter followed. Several people pulled out their own phones to like and share the post, and malicious comments began to flood in like a digital tide. "A nobody," one wrote. "Looks pathetic," commented another. The words from complete strangers formed a digital pyre, echoing the disdain in the room. Ivy remained motionless, her hazel eyes catching the glow from Clara's screen, but she said nothing. Her silence seemed to fuel their glee, as if her composure was a challenge they had to break. Elise leaned into Clara, her voice dripping with faux pity. Poor thing, she doesn't even know she's a meme now. The cruelty didn't stop at words. A distant cousin named Trevor, wearing a deep blue velvet blazer, called out from across the room. Hey, sweetheart, the kitchen's that way." He pointed toward a side door, grinning as his friends clapped him on the back. Marissa, in her crimson dress, decided that words were not enough. She glided across the room, the sharp click of her stiletto heels on the marble sounding like a countdown. She stopped inches from Ivy, her taller frame looming, her perfume sharp and suffocating. "You're in the wrong place, darling," she said loudly, drawing every eye. Then she reached out, flicking Ivy's cardigan with her perfectly manicured, red-lacquered fingernails as if it were trash. "This isn't a soup kitchen. Why don't you leave before you embarrass yourself further?" The crowd watched, some smirking, some whispering, but none stepping in. Their silence was complicity. Trevor, not wanting to be outdone, slipped behind Ivy. He took a cocktail napkin, scrawled the words "charity case" on it with a Sharpie, and deftly tucked it into the strap of Ivy's bag when she wasn't looking. Snickers spread like a slow-burning fire. People began to point at the note, its bold letters a brand on Ivy's back. Clara quickly snapped another photo. "Now she's a walking joke," Elise whispered. Ivy, still unaware, kept her focus on the empty chair at the front, where the lawyer would soon sit. But she could feel the crowd's glee, their amusement a knife twisting in her dignity. Her hands remained steady on her cloth bag. She didn't look at them, didn't acknowledge their taunts. She stood still, her breathing even. To them, her silence was weakness. They couldn't see the steel beneath it, couldn't understand that her stillness held a power that could command a room without a single word. She glanced briefly at the security camera in the corner, its small red light blinking steadily. She knew it was live, feeding to a private server that only 2 people could access. One was her. The other was not yet here. Part 2. The shocking will at precisely 10 a.m. Not a second earlier or later, the lawyer Arthur Grayson entered. He was a man in his 60s, with salt and pepper hair meticulously groomed and a face carved by decades of handling great fortunes and bitter feuds. His gray suit was crisp, and the leather briefcase in his hand seemed heavy with the secrets it contained. His presence immediately brought a different kind of gravity to the room. The whispers died. The smirks vanished, replaced by masks of somber, greedy anticipation. The crowd was no longer a pack of vultures picking at a single target. They were now a pack of wolves, patiently waiting for the alpha to distribute the kill. Grayson's eyes swept the room, a practiced, all-seeing gaze that missed nothing, from Preston's gold tie to the crocodile tears welling in a female cousin's eyes. His gaze paused on Ivy for a microsecond, a flicker of acknowledgement so brief, yet so potent it made Preston frown and whisper to Marissa, "What's that about?" Before Grayson could speak, Gerald Hayes, the investor in the pinstripe suit who had muttered about Logan's strays, rose to his feet. His expensive suit creased as he pointed a finger directly at Ivy, a finger that trembled with self-righteous indignation. "Mr. Grayson," he declared, his voice booming like a judge delivering a verdict. "Before we begin, we must address this. This woman is a fraud." The room buzzed in agreement. Heads nodded, eyes narrowed at Ivy, as if she were a thief caught red-handed. "Logan would never let someone like her near his estate," Gerald continued, his voice rising. "She is here to scam us, plain and simple. Where's the security? Why was she allowed in?" His wife, the woman in emeralds, added, her voice shrill, "She's probably got a fake ID in that ragged bag of hers." Someone should check her and escort her out before we insult Logan's memory. The accusation hung in the air, turning Ivy into a criminal in their minds. Her presence was an offense they could not tolerate. But Ivy remained still, her gaze placid, seemingly unmoved by the storm of outrage directed at her. It was her calm that infuriated them more. Grayson cleared his throat, a dry sound that echoed in the vast hall. He didn't look at Gerald, nor did he look at Ivy. He placed his leather briefcase on the mahogany table, his old but steady fingers unfastening the two metal clasps. They opened with a sharp, definitive click, click. "We are here," he began, his voice flat and devoid of emotion, "to read the last will and testament of Mr. Logan Alexander Thorne, executed 3 years ago and verified as authentic." Another ripple of whispers. 3 years? Logan had only disappeared 6 months ago. His private jet lost over the Pacific. No wreckage, no body, just a void that had fueled endless speculation and greed. Most assumed he was dead. Most hoped so. Preston straightened his tie, his smirk returning. "Well, let's get to it, Arthur. Who gets the keys to the kingdom?" Clara leaned forward, her perfectly manicured nails tapping on her phone, already planning her victory post. Lillian clutched her pearls, whispering to Trevor about the summer house in Nice. Ivy remained still, her cloth bag now resting at her feet. She watched Grayson's hands as he withdrew a single envelope sealed with red wax. No flourish, no preamble. He put on his glasses, and his eyes once again swept the crowd before settling on the page. He broke the wax seal. The brittle crack it made was loud in the tense silence. The crowd held its breath, leaning forward, their eyes hungry. This was it. The moment they had dressed for, schemed for, flown across continents for. Logan's Empire Tech patents, real estate, a biotech firm worth $90 billion was up for grabs. Or so they thought. Grayson unfolded the paper, his voice steady but deliberate. Each word was a stone dropped into still water. "I, Logan Alexander Thorne, being of sound mind, declare this my final will." He paused, letting the gravity of the moment sink in. "To my family, colleagues, and associates," he read on, "I leave nothing but this truth. Wealth reveals character, not worth." The room froze. Preston's smile faltered. Clara's phone slipped an inch in her hand. Gerald's jaw tightened, and his wife's emerald suddenly seemed heavy. Nothing? It had to be a mistake. Grayson continued, unfazed. "All my assets, company shares, properties, accounts, and intellectual rights are bequeathed to one person." The room held its breath, a glimmer of hope. A secret child, perhaps? A hidden trustee? The one who stood by me for no reason other than love. The one who never asked my net worth, never sought my name for status. Grayson's voice remained even, dispassionate. But every word was a hammer blow against the crowd's arrogance. "My wife, Ivy." Part 3. The identity revealed, the name hung in the air, sharp and unbelievable. For a moment, the silence in the grand hall became heavier, denser. Then, like a crack in ice, it shattered into 1,000 pieces of chaotic disbelief. A single gasp, jagged and pained like a wound, tore through the room. Heads whipped around, bewildered eyes searching for a strange face to match the strange name, an intruder they had never met. Preston was the first to laugh, a short, barking sound of utter disbelief. Wife? Logan didn't have a wife. He never married. "Arthur, are you drunk?" Marissa's hand flew to her mouth, her crimson nails a stark contrast against her paling skin. "Absurd," she hissed. "This must be a scam. Someone has forged this damn thing." Gerald Hayes, who had been standing all this time, stumbled back a step, his face flushing with anger. "A conspiracy. I told you, someone is trying to seize the entire estate. We need to call the police, call our lawyers. This will is a forgery. Lillian. The aunt clutched Trevor's arm, her pearl necklace trembling. She's not here, is she? Her voice was shrill. Some gold digger we've never met, trying to steal what's ours. Arthur Grayson held up a hand, a simple but commanding gesture that quelled the hysteria. The will is perfectly legal. Signed and notarized. All supporting documents, marriage certificate, photographs, personal letters are available for verification. He calmly reached into his briefcase, as if retrieving a routine business report, and pulled out a thin folder. He opened it, revealing a photograph. Logan, younger, beaming with a radiant smile, his arm around a woman in a simple white dress. They were standing outside a courthouse. On the back of the photo, a date was written, 7 years ago. The room erupted. Preston slammed his fist on the table. This is insanity. Who is she? Clara, having recovered her phone, jumped to her feet, her face a mask of fury and confusion. Where is this Ivy? Show her face, Trevor sneered nervously. Probably some con artist hiding in Portugal or somewhere. Marissa's voice cut through, laced with venom. If she's real, why isn't she here? Too ashamed to show her face. And then she stepped forward. Ivy Clark moved. The movement was quiet, deliberate, like a tide silently turning. Her flat shoes made no sound on the marble floor, but every eye followed her as she crossed the room. Her cardigan swayed slightly, her linen dress catching the light. She stopped beside Grayson, her posture straight, her face calm. The cloth bag still hung from her shoulder, as unassuming as she was. A dead silence fell upon the room. This time, a silence of dawning, sickening realization. Preston's mouth opened and closed, his gold tie suddenly looking garish. Clara's face, flushed, then drained of all color, the mocking photo on her phone now burning a hole in her palm. Gerald Hayes sank back into his chair, his wife's emeralds now looking like dull green glass. Lillian's pearls seemed to be choking her. Grayson nodded to Ivy, a flicker of respect in his eyes. Mrs. Thorne, he said, and handed her the folder. She took it without a tremor, her fingers steady as she opened it. She glanced at the photograph, her lips curving just a hint, as if remembering that day. Then she closed the folder and faced the room. I didn't come for the money, she said, her voice clear and low, like a bell through fog. I came to see who you were, to see who among you truly cared for Logan as a man, not a bank account, who would mourn him, not his fortune. She paused, her hazel eyes sweeping the crowd, pinning each one of them. And you showed me exactly who you are. Preston found his voice, shaky but defiant. You're saying you're his wife? You? He gestured at her dress, her cardigan, his laugh forced. Logan Thorne married this. No offense, lady, but you look like you shop at thrift stores. Ivy didn't blink. I do, she said simply. Logan didn't care. He loved me for me, not for what I wore or what I owned. Can any of you here say the same? Clara snorted, crossing her arms. Nice act, but I'm not buying it. If you're his wife, where's the proof? A photo isn't enough. Anyone can fake that. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room, emboldening the crowd. Grayson opened his briefcase again, this time pulling out a stack of documents. Marriage license, dated 7 years ago, signed by both parties and 2 witnesses. Personal letters from Logan to Ivy, handwritten, verified by a forensic handwriting. Analyst. Bank records showing joint accounts, kept private at Logan's request. He'd paused, pulling out a small USB drive, and footage from their wedding. He inserted the drive into a laptop on the table, and a large screen on the wall flickered to life. The room held its breath. Grainy footage appeared. The steps of a courthouse. Logan in a simple suit, Ivy in that white dress. Both of them laughing. As they kissed. The date stamp in the corner matched the certificate. The crowd's defiance crumbled. Faces paled, eyes darted to Ivy, who watched the footage with a quiet ache in her gaze. Marissa stood there, her voice trembling with rage. "This is a setup. You planned this, didn't you? Tricking us into looking bad. You're nobody. Logan would never marry someone like you." Her words stung, but Ivy's face didn't change. She let Marissa's anger hang in the air. Then she spoke, her voice colder now, sharp enough to cut. "You're right about one thing. This was planned." She stepped closer to the crowd, her presence filling the room. "Not to trick you, but to test you. To see if any of you cared enough to ask who I was before you mocked me. To see if you'd honor Logan's memory or just claw for his wealth. You failed. All of you." She reached into her cloth bag, pulling out a small remote. "Logan isn't dead," she said, each word deliberate. "He's alive, and he's been watching you this whole time." Part 4. The judge's return. Ivy's words struck the dead silence like a lightning bolt. "Logan isn't dead." Each word was a hammer blow, shattering the foundation of their reality. "He's alive, and he's been watching you this whole time." Her thumb brushed over the small remote. A single press. A quiet click, almost inaudible, yet it had the force of an explosion. The large, forgotten screen on the wall blazed to life. This was no grainy old footage. This was a live, crystal-clear image. In a dimly lit room, what looked like a control center with smaller screens in the background, a man was sitting. It was Logan Thorne, 40-2 years old, lean, his dark hair streaked with gray at the temples. But his blue eyes were as sharp as ever, undimmed by rumors of his death. He leaned back in his chair, his expression calm and unyielding, like a judge weighing the souls of the damned. The timestamp in the corner blinked mercilessly. April 15th, 2025, 10:32 a.m. Live. The grand hall didn't erupt with words, but with horrified gasps. Preston stumbled backward, his face ashen, the gold tie now looking as if it were strangling him. Clara dropped her phone, its screen shattering on the marble floor with a sickening crack, a perfect mirror of her own shattered world. Gerald's wife clutched his arm, whispering in pure terror, "No, it can't be." And then Lillian's pearl necklace snapped. Dozens of white pearls scattered, rolling across the floor like solidified tears, each one a fragment of her broken pride. Logan's voice came through the overhead speakers, low and resonant, filling every corner of the room. "You thought I was gone," he said, his gaze seeming to pierce through the camera, through the wall, pinning each and every one of them. "You thought this was your chance to carve up my life like a cake. But I've been here, listening. Every word, every sneer, every lie." His eyes on the screen seemed to soften for a fraction of a second as he continued. "Ivy warned me. She said you would show your true colors. She was right." Ivy's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. She turned to face the petrified crowd, her voice now steady and clear. Logan's plane didn't crash. It was a cover, a way to step back, to see who would stay loyal and who would turn. You all rushed here, dressed in your best, ready to claim what wasn't yours. But this was never about money. She paused. It was about truth. As she finished speaking, the two heavy oak doors at the end of the hall creaked open once again. This time, it wasn't a woman in simple clothes. This time, it was him. Logan Thorne walked into the room, in the flesh. His presence was solid, powerful, like a storm breaking. He wore a simple suit, no tie, his leather shoes scuffed as if from a long journey. The crowd parted as he walked, their whispers dying, their bravado evaporating. The air crackled with his undeniable power. He stopped beside Ivy. His hand reached out, lightly brushing hers, a hold that didn't need to be tight to be an unbreakable anchor. She looked up at him, her eyes softening for the first time, and he gave her a silent nod of agreement. They were a single, unified front. Then he faced the room. His voice didn't need to be raised, but it carried absolute weight. Ivy designed this test. The will, the reading, these cameras, he said, glancing at the camera in the corner. All of it. She wanted to know who you were when you thought no one was watching. Who would respect a stranger? Who would show kindness? Who would care about me, not my bank account? He paused, his blue eyes sweeping over their pale faces, pinning each one with his gaze. Not one of you passed. Logan's eyes finally locked. On to Preston, the man who had mocked Ivy first. The gold tie now looked like a gaudy noose around his neck. You called my wife a maid, Logan said, his voice low but lethal, each word carving through the horrified silence of the room. You laughed while she stood there alone, letting you show your true self. Did you think I wouldn't see? Preston shrank back, his bravado completely gone. His hands fumbled with his tie as if it could save him. The crowd watched, frozen, as Logan stepped closer, his presence towering despite his simple suit. You're not family, Preston. You're a parasite. And I'm done feeding you. Instantly, a security guard in a black suit appeared at Preston's side, his hand taking his arm with firm finality. Preston tried to speak, his voice cracking. Logan, wait. We didn't know. She didn't say anything. Logan's gaze snapped to him, cold as ice. She shouldn't have had to. You saw a woman you didn't recognize, and your first instinct was to tear her down. That isn't family. That isn't loyalty. He flicked his head toward the door. Get him out. As Preston was led away, his protests drowned in the echo of Logan's words. The room felt a little lighter. Justice, a tangible force, had begun. Ivy's honor was being restored with every one of Preston's disgraceful steps. Part 5. The judgment. Preston's ignominious exit sent a cold message to everyone who remained. The silence in the room was no longer one of greed, but one of absolute terror. Clara, the stylish niece, stepped forward, her usually confident face contorted in a mask of desperation. Uncle Logan, we're sorry. Okay, we didn't mean it. It was just a stupid joke. Her eyes darted to Ivy, a fake, pleading look. Tell him, Aunt Ivy. Tell him to forgive us. Her words showed she still didn't understand. She thought this was an offense to be forgiven, not a character that had been exposed. Logan shook his head, a cold disappointment in his eyes. This isn't about forgiveness, Clara. It's about consequences. He looked directly at her, his voice steady but searing. You turned my wife into a meme, thinking your followers would cheer for your cruelty. You built an entire empire on lies and fleeting attention. He nodded to Grayson, who merely tapped a few keys on his laptop. Instantly, the phone in Clara's hand began to buzz violently, a shrill sound in the silence. She looked down at the screen in horror. A digital nightmare was unfolding in real time. Her follower count was plummeting, the numbers flying backward like a countdown to obscurity. Notifications flooded her screen. Your account has been deactivated. Brand partner X has terminated your contract. Your post has been removed for violating community standards. Her empire, the one she had spent years building, was crumbling to dust in seconds. Lies don't last long, Clara, Logan said as another security guard stepped to her side. You are banned from my companies, my properties, and my life. The phone with its cracked screen slipped from her numb fingers, clattering onto the marble floor. As she was led away, her face was blank, an empty shell devoid of its smugness and power, left only with the dazed confusion of a queen who had just been dethroned. Next, Logan's gaze shifted to Marissa. She stood there, her crimson dress now looking like a splash of blood, her arrogance having melted into a quivering fear. You, Logan said, his voice flat. You touched my wife. You judged her by her cardigan and decided she belonged in a soup kitchen. He paused. Now you can leave with nothing but the dress on your back. Do not ever show your face to us again. Marissa burst into tears, her sobs echoing in the hall as she was led away, her once glorious red dress trailing on the floor like a shroud for her pride. Gerald Hayes and his wife huddled together, her emeralds looking like lifeless green stones in the harsh light. Gerald tried to speak. Logan, from a business standpoint. Don't. Logan cut him off. From a business standpoint, character is the greatest asset, and you two are bankrupt. His eyes were like ice. You called my wife classless. You have no right to stay here. They bowed their heads, offering no further protest, and silently followed security out the door. Trevor, the perpetrator of the cruel napkin prank, tried to shrink into the crowd, but Logan's eyes found him. Logan didn't speak a word to him. He simply glanced at a security guard and flicked his head in Trevor's direction. The silent dismissal was more damning than any tirade. Trevor paled and hurried away before he could be escorted. Finally, only Lillian was left. She stood amidst the pearls scattered at her feet, her old face wrinkled with shock and humiliation. Grayson, at a signal from Logan, stepped forward, holding another document. An addendum to the will, effective immediately. Grayson's voice was like a gavel. Anyone who has offered insult or injury to Mrs. Ivy Thorne today, as recorded by security footage, audio logs, or witness accounts, is hereby disinherited. Completely. He began to read the list, each name a nail in the coffin of their greed. Preston Thorne, Marissa Thorne, Clara Evans, Gerald Hayes and wife, Trevor Lang. He paused, looking directly at Lillian, and Lillian Ward. She let out a final gasp, and her pride finally shattered completely. She was led away, her stumbling feet crushing her own pearls, the sound a fitting end to a life lived for appearances. Within minutes, the room was purged. The shouts, protests, and sobs had vanished, swallowed by the estate's long corridors. The grand doors closed with a heavy, final thud, sealing their fate. The hall was strangely quiet now. Only the lingering scent of expensive perfume and the debris of pride remained. Clara's cracked phone, Lillian's scattered pearls, and a spilled glass of champagne on the floor. The vultures were gone, leaving behind a clean, resonant silence. Part 6. The truth and true family. When the heavy oak doors closed, cutting off the last sounds of chaos, they left behind a silence that was almost sacred. The April sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air and glinting off the wreckage of the recent battle. Clara's cracked phone, Lillian's pearls glittering like abandoned tears on the marble floor. The room, once suffocating with greed and arrogance, seemed to take a cleansing breath. When Logan and Ivy turned, they saw they were not entirely alone. 3 people remained, huddled together in a corner, their expressions a mixture of awe, relief, and bewilderment. They were the ones who had not laughed, not sneered, not whispered. The first was Sarah Ellis, the nurse who had witnessed their wedding 7 years ago. She was older now, her hair grayer, her eyes wet not with sadness, but with the vindication she had just witnessed. She had kept their secret all these years, a quiet promise made to the happy young couple she had met at the courthouse. The second was Michael Reed, the librarian with the thick glasses. He was the one who had given Ivy a quiet, respectful nod when she first entered, the only act of kindness she had received before the storm broke. He had recognized her from the time she and Logan had visited the town library, looking for old books, not financial reports. And the third was Anna, a groundskeeper at the estate. She stood, her work-worn hands clasped in front of her. It was she who had offered Ivy a glass of water before the will reading began, asking no questions, simply seeing a person who looked like she might need one. Logan's voice, when he spoke, to them, had lost all of its lethal coldness. It was soft, warm, and sincere. "Thank you," he said, and the simple words carried immense weight. "Thank you, all three of you." In a room full of judgment, you chose silence. In a room full of cruelty, you chose kindness. He walked closer to them, Ivy by his side. "Sarah, thank you for keeping our promise. Michael, thank you for seeing a person, not an outfit. And Anna, thank you for a glass of water. Sometimes, a glass of water is worth more than a fortune." Anna blushed, mumbling that it was nothing, but Logan shook his head. "It was everything. It is everything." He looked back at Ivy, then at the three of them. They were blood. "But you," he said, his voice filled with an absolute certainty, "our family." Then, he turned back to Ivy, the space between them now private despite the witnesses. He gently reached out, his fingers brushing the sleeve of her faded cardigan, the very garment Marissa had flicked away with such contempt. The gesture was an affirmation, a quiet celebration. "You were right," he whispered, his voice for her. Alone, about all of it. Ivy's gaze lingered on the empty chairs, the spilled champagne, the broken pearls. A sadness flickered across her face, a sorrow deeper than anger. "I didn't want to be right, Logan," she said, her voice just as low. "I wanted them to be better. I hoped, just for a moment, that someone would see me and ask, 'Who are you?' Instead of 'What are you?'" He squeezed her hand gently. "You see the best in people. I see them as they are. Perhaps that's why we need each other." She smiled, a small but real smile, and leaned her head against his shoulder. Her soft cardigan brushed against his suit jacket. They stood there for a moment, two people who had created a storm just to find peace in its eye. The world outside these stone walls might value them in the billions, but in this moment, their worth was simply the presence of the other. Ivy pulled the small remote from her bag one last time. With a final press, the small red light on the security camera in the corner went dark. The test was over. Its work was done. Together, they walked to the large window, looking out at the hills glowing, green under the April sky. The Thorne estate, once a fortress of wealth and isolation, now felt like a sanctuary, a new beginning. It was no longer defined by those who had just been cast out, but by those who remained. Ivy didn't need the money, the estate, the empire. She had never wanted it. She had only wanted Logan alive, whole, and hers. And now, with their world stripped down and purified by fire, they stood together, unshaken. For in the end, the greatest empires are not built of stone and steel, but of truths that cut deep and kindness that lifts high. And that was a fortune no one could ever take away.